Hi guys, this is Vysh from Vysh IAS, and we are going to continue our Spectrum series. We have done till chapter 6, so now we will do chapter 7. And what we are going to do is we are going to include chapter 12 as well, because chapter 12 is very small chapter dealing with the economic impact of British rule in India. And I'll tell you the reason during the lecture, like why we are merging it together. And so two chapters will be done today in one single video. Both are very small chapters, but both are very important chapters with respect to mains, not prelims. Yesterday when we did social movements in India, it was more important with respect to prelims, but this is more important with respect to mains. We'll see. We'll begin now. So first thing is, this chapter, chapter 7, it's about the actual beginning of the struggle of Indian national movement. Like we have seen the revolt of 1857, then we saw slowly social movements are beginning to creep in, and people have been slowly realizing that the British is not in favor of Indian interest. So the Indians will start their agitation or showing off their frustration by different means. So what were actually the factors? This can be a mains question. What are the factors which led to the growth of Indian nationalism in the 1850s or after the second half of 19th century? So we'll see the factors. First one is political, administrative and economic unification. So the British, as you know, we have seen they were capturing places across India, whether it be in the south, west, north or east. So in all directions they were forming their trading posts, they were forming their territories by imposing different annexation policies. So all these things started forming a unified boundary for India. Like it's mentioned here, the Himalayas, Cape Comorin, Khyber Pass, Assam. This is in the four directions, four sides of India, and they started to establish uniform judiciary, professional civil services, and they started to codify all the laws, the criminal laws and civil laws, and also the rail and transport was set up during the time of Lord Dalhousie in the 1850s. So all these things started to bring about unification, whether it is in terms of political administration or whether it is in the terms of economy. Even the trade, the crops, everything was interrelated. It started to affect region by region. So this unification, it's actually everything was done by the British. So British, although they were doing everything for their gain, it indirectly started inspiring the Indians to come together, and the idea of India was being developed. So this is the first and most important factor for the growth of Indian nationalism. Second one is the understanding of contradiction in Indian and colonial interest, and this is the time when the middle class will be rising. So earlier the Indians, they had no clue of what is happening. They were ruled by different rulers over different times, like the Delhi Sultanate is there, Mughals are there, then after that the British is coming. So they were not actually bothered, or they did not have any idea what is going on. They were paying their taxes, they were living their life. So when the Britishers came, and these people, Indian people, tried to understand the idea of India more. They understood like the colonial interests are more to take out all our wealth and then destroy Indian economy. So this realization or this understanding between the different tastes of what Indians want and what the Britishers actually wanted, this realization is one major factor which can be used in your answer. Third one is Indian Renaissance. We have seen a full chapter for this. The social, religious reforms and the modernization, the inclusion of sciences, the modern or progressive thinking by different leaders, right from Rajaram Mohan Roy to Swami Vivekananda. We have seen in detail about the Indian Renaissance. If you have not seen the last chapter, please watch that video, chapter 6, and then proceed to this video. So this is also one important reason. Western education, thought, English language, philosophy, science, liberty. We have seen all this in detail. Next is the role of press and literature. Like you know, Indian press had started developing. in all the three provinces. Like Bengal, there was the Bengal Gazette newspaper. The Bombay, there was Bombay Courier, I think. Madras Courier was there. There were different papers, newspapers in both foreign languages and vernacular languages. And if you see the statistics, by 1877, about 169 vernacular newspapers, that is Indian language newspapers, were already in circulation. And so people started to not only learn the news happenings around, they also started to get educated on basic values of democracy, civil rights, freedom, self-government, industrialization. They started to learn all these things, and they started to know how other countries are doing, or how actually a democracy works. So they started coming out and questioning the British laws. Then rediscovery of India's past. Leaders, great leaders like Vivekananda, he addressed the people. He started to explain the greatness and richness of the country of India. So this kind of realization, socially and spiritually, also motivated the people to come forward. A glorious trade relations. So India used to have great trade relations with the Roman Empire and other countries during the olden era before Christ. So all these time things where people did not know about all these things. So when leaders came forward and started to tell people of how great a country India is, and how people should try to regain their self-respect, all this led to nationalist feelings among the people. World events. Obviously, when they started to gain knowledge through education and through newspapers, they came to know about what is happening in France, what is happening in USA, how they were also a colony under British, and they were coming out and liberating themselves to form a great democracy. So Indians also felt like they should also step forward and gain independence for themselves. Reactions to British policies, like we know, Britishers had very tough or strict policies which are very harsh on to the Indians. So these are few policy names which we'll see in detail when we do different chapters. The Vernacular Press Act we have mentioned multiple times in our videos. It was an act by Lord Lytton which banned, or which imposed lot of restrictions on Indian newspapers. So there are a lot of interesting stories about it. We'll see when we do newspapers later. Also, I have mentioned about this in the first chapter, chapter 1, which was sources and approaches. So there also you can get the names of multiple newspapers and works by leaders which are important for prelims. Please watch the chapter 1. So next is age of civil services was being reduced from 21 to 19. So the Britishers were not even allowing Indians to attend civil service exams during the earlier days, and later when it was allowed also, they started to reduce the age limit. So Indians who were already late in getting primary or secondary education, they could not appear for the civil service examination, which used to happen in London at that time, not in India. It used to happen outside. So also the age limit reduction, all these things were creating anger among the Indian youth, and they started revolting. Then the Delhi Darbar. Delhi Darbar, we have 2 to 3 darbars which we will learn. Maybe we'll make a table and tell you which years it happened, and which was the king or queen which visited India during the Delhi Darbars. So in 1877, a famine was happening, a very bad condition for Indian peasants and Indian villages, and that time they did a very lavish organization of Delhi Darbar. So this also created anger among the Indians. When people are dying, they are celebrating over there. Then the Ilbert Bill controversy is again related to the judiciary. Indian judges were not allowed to try any foreign people. So the Indian judiciary was undermined, and Indian judges were not given any good status compared to the foreign counterpart. So that was again a controversial bill which was in the time of Lord Ripon, and later it was repealed. So like this, the reactions to British policies also was a start of growth of Indian nationalism. So these are very important points which you have to make a note, and you can write in detail. Easily you can form a 150-word answer with these points. Now, as you all know, Indian National Congress, which is there even now, the Congress party, this was the first, it's not the first actually, but it was the most important one during the nationalist struggle, which will be forming the Constituent Assembly later and writing the constitution for India. So, but even before Indian National Congress, across the 3 provinces, Bengal, Bombay and Madras, there were multiple small associations happening by different nationalist leaders, and later each of them will combine together or come together to form the major Indian National Congress. So we'll see the names of few which can be important for prelims. So we'll see the names of a few organizations. So this is actually just telling the differentiation between how the first half of 19th century and how the second half of 19th century went. The first one was dominated by only the wealthy people, and it was small regional in character, so the geographical span was less, and they used to simply write long petitions to the British, but it was of no use actually. The British never cared of what petitions are being written. The second half actually came up with the educated middle class, because by 1830s and 1850s education had started in India, and people were becoming more intellectual and they knew about the world happenings, and they were actually going into the civil services or to the advocate. They were becoming advocates and lawyers. So people were actually intellectuals and they knew how to demand for their needs, or the growth of Indians. They actually knew how to get their demands fulfilled. So that is the difference of timeline. Now we'll see the different associations. This is the first one. In Bengal we'll see 5 or 6. I think Bengal has the most number of associations, because the most intellectual class or leaders of that time was there in West Bengal. Bengal actually, the split of Bengal has not yet happened. So Bangabhasha Prakasika Sabha 1836. This was by associates of Raja Ramohun. It's not by Raja Ramohun, by the associates of Raja Ramohun. So UPSC can trick you by putting this statement like it was started by Raja Ramohun, right? So make a note of this. Next is Zamindars Association, which is also called Landholder Society. So this was actually for the grievances of landlords. The landlords had their problems, and so they formed their own society to ask certain favors to the British government. So Zamindars Association. Third is Bengal British Society, 1843. So this is, I think, in the order of timeline. So 1840, the actual conditions of the Indians. So Indian problems were raised through this society, Bengal British Society. Now 2 and 3, the Zamindars Association and the Bengal British Society, they'll come together and they'll form a very important body called the British Indian Association. So you see, right, British Bengal is changed to British Indian by merging with the Zamindars Association. It is in 1851. And they used to send petitions for separate legislature, reduce salary of higher officers, abolish unwanted duties, and also they had a huge influence in forming the conditions of Charter Act 1853. We will see all the Charter Acts and Council Acts later in the administrative chapter. So this is also an important body, British Indian Association. Then East India Association is very important because it was started by Dadabhai Naoroji. Dadabhai Naoroji is called the Grand Old Man of India, who was a very great economic nationalist. It was started in 1866. So it was started with a few Indians in England. Indian League, it started by Sisir Kumar Ghosh in 1875. So this is a definite potential question for match the following. Remember these names: Indian League by Sisir Kumar Ghosh, East India Association by Dadabhai Naoroji, Indian Association of Calcutta by Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan in 1876. This is the most important before the INC. Before Indian National Congress, if anybody could reach a lot of people or could create some impact for the Indians, it was Indian Association of Calcutta. It was against the landlord policies and it was more pro-poor, and it had a low fee for its membership. So they used to charge fees for their membership, all these bodies, but this had a very low fee, so it was pro-poor. So these are the important bodies in Bengal. So please try to remember at least the final 3 which we have mentioned here: East India Association by Dadabhai Naoroji, Indian League by Shishir Kumar Ghosh, and Indian Association of Calcutta by Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan. This can be a question. In Bombay, 2 important bodies are there. One is Pune Sarvajanik Sabha and Bombay Presidency Association. It's very easy to remember because it's 2 place names, Pune and Bombay. And these 2, one is by M.G. Ranade. And M.G. Ranade we had seen in the last chapter also, because he did a lot of work for the upliftment of women and betterment of women. So that becomes important. Bombay Presidency Association is by 3 important leaders: Badruddin Tyabji, Firoz Shah Mehta and K.T. Telang in 1885. This was once asked in UPSC who were the leaders associated with Bombay Presidency. I think 1 or 2 years back only. It was a very recent question. So this is important. And Badruddin Tyabji is again important because he was the first Muslim to become the president of Indian National Congress. We'll see the formation of Indian National Congress after this next slide. That time we'll see the leaders, also the presidents. Not everyone, we'll see that in a different chapter maybe, but Badruddin Tyabji is the first Muslim to become the Indian National Congress president. Next is Madras. Madras, I think only one body. Madras is Madras Mahajan Sabha. So these are the names: Veera Raghavachari and Subramanya Iyer and Anandacharlu in 1884. So all these are like, the timeline is close. We know Indian National Congress formed in 1885. So these are all important contemporary bodies happening in different locations. So these are easy to remember because the name itself have the place name, Pune and Bombay, and here you have Madras Mahajan Sabha. Only the leader names you have to remember: Veera Raghavachari, Subramanya. Subramanya is again associated with the Hindu, and one more newspaper is there. If you know, you can tell it in comments. We have told it multiple times in previous videos, which were the journals of Subramanya Iyer. Okay. Now we will see the actual formation of Indian National Congress in 1885. The two pictures which you see right side, they are A.O. Hume and W.C. Banerjee. A.O. Hume was a retired civil servant. He is the one who actually asked Dufferin. Lord Dufferin was the viceroy at that time, who asked Lord Dufferin to form this body. And W.C. Banerjee was the first president. So the first president was an Indian, and he is W.C. Banerjee. So the prelude to that, Indian National Conference, a body was there. We saw it in the previous slide at Calcutta. So this was by Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan. This was a body which was equally important at that time. So how the Indian National Congress will perform, or how it will operate, it will be like every December, that is once in a year, every December it will meet in a different place of India, different part of India, and the condition was the president cannot be from that particular place. This statement is very important because this is one major reason or one major clause which will be causing the split between moderates and extremists. We'll see that in the next chapter, I think, but it is a very important point. You should remember, the president cannot be from the same place. Like if Bal Gangadhar Tilak is from Bombay Presidency, and if the INC meeting is happening over there in that December, he cannot be the president that year. He has to wait till the next year. So this was one major reason. We'll see that in detail later. It's very important, and questions have been asked multiple times based on all these things. 1890, this is for prelims. Kadambani Ganguly, she was the first woman to address INC. So this can be a question: who was the first woman to address INC? And they'll give choices like Sarojini Naidu, Annie Besant, Kadambani Ganguly. So you should know, like, she, who was a graduate from Calcutta, was the first to address INC. She was not the president, she was the one to address INC. Now the safety valve controversy, a lot of historians have been debating over this, and multiple books are written over this, multiple articles are there in the archives. So this is actually a version like A.O. Hume convinced Dufferin to form this. But why? It was actually because Indians were forming multiple bodies. We saw in the last slide, across India, pan-India movement were happening, and leaders were coming up with different bodies, and they were becoming a challenge or a threat to the British government, British India government. So what these people, the retired civil servant A.O. Hume thought is, why don't we make a body ourselves and give some representation to few of these leaders, most important ones, we can put it in the INC, so that they also, the Britishers themselves, had a control over the Indians, and all the other bodies will automatically collapse. So that there is a controversy of whether this is true or not, but this is a version given by most historians, and it's called safety valve controversy. So see, it was like for releasing the growing discontent among the Indians. They wanted to simply appease few of the Indians and make Indians work according to them. That is why INC was formed. This is a story of safety valve controversy. But Bipin Chandra, he has his own view, and he is telling, like, the early congressmen used Hume as a lightning conductor, that is as a catalyst to bring together the nationalist forces even in the guise of a safety valve. So Bipin Chandra is saying that the Indian National Congress leaders of that time, they knew like what the English or British are trying to do. They are trying to make a body of their own. But even after knowing that, the Congress leaders wanted to use this opportunity and used this activity of Hume as a catalyst to bring together all the nationalist forces from across India. So both versions are there. We don't know which is correct, but this is a debate which is going on. So you should know this particular story. So moderate. Now we don't have a concept of extremists. That will come later. Moderates are the leaders who were the initial Congress leaders. Dadabhai Naoroji, S.N. Banerjee, W.C. Banerjee, Firoz Shah Mehta. We have seen these names in the previous slides also. They believed in moderate and liberal politics. That is, they were very slow, but they did it in a very orderly, organized way. They used to do lot of meetings. They used to write long petitions, but they did it everything in a very organized way. They did not demand with a very harsh tone, or they did not walk out of the Congress, or they did not do anything harsh. They always did it in a very organized way. Petitions, meeting, prayers, and they thought like the Britishers were unaware of the real situation. That is what they initially thought. Like Britishers did not know like poor are being discriminated, or there is racial overtones, or they did not know. So if we let them know what is happening, the real picture of India, maybe they will help. This was the initial mindset of the moderates. So the INC sessions, which I told will be happening in different parts of India, was once actually planned to happen in London as well in 1892. But due to some reason, it was postponed and never revived later. So you should know this, like the Indian National Congress meetings never happened outside India. This is one important point. British Committee of INC was formed in London in 1899. This is a body formed, it's just a version of INC which was formed in London. They thought time is not right for direct action, so educate the masses and involve INC. So they thought like the time is not right for direct action or doing any harsh, taking any harsh steps. So they were just busy with educating the people and trying to involve the educated people in the Indian National Congress meetings. So evaluation of early nationalists. So this is again how they were, the nature of them. Spectrum has a detailed analysis of it. So we'll see. They represented the most progressive forces of that time. So that time everyone were like in chaos, or they were in pockets of geographical areas. So Indian National Congress leaders were the most progressive ones among all of them. They were able to create wild national awakening of Indians having common interest. So this is again, they did not reach the masses actually, but they could connect with the high level intellectuals who had common interest from different parts. So they brought together these leaders. They trained people on political work and popularized modern ideas. So they were, like we saw in the previous slide, they were not ready for direct action, so they were trying to improve politically and educationally. They were trying to improve themselves. They exposed exploitative character of the British, that we'll see in the next slide when we see about the economic drain theory. They made people realize like the British is actually looting the entire wealth of India and taking it outside India. They were not communal at all, like they did not represent a particular religion. They were only working for the actual problems in India. So they were not communal. Why did it initially fail to create a great impact was they could not widen their democratic base or reach to the minority. That is, they did not reach till the last man in India. They did not reach the poor or the peasants. They were doing lot of, they were pulling out leaders who were representing them, but they could not actually connect to the actual masses. Moderates and early nationalists lacked faith in the masses. They actually thought like the masses are uneducated and they are not fit for coming into the meetings of INCs. Felt they were ignorant and had to be first welded into a nation before their entry into political sphere. So they thought they should be first educated and given information about how a polity works, how a government works, and only then they can be involved in the meetings. They failed to realize that only by political participation and national struggle movement they can come together. So again the same thing, they wanted to bring together people by a national struggle, but they failed to do it because they did not allow everyone to participate. Now these are 2-3 important statements in Spectrum. The British government called the INC nationalists as seditious Brahmins or disloyal Babus, because earlier Indians were working under the British, and now when they were raising their voice, the British government started to call them by these kind of names. Slowly you will see the divide and rule policy also will come. So they started to picture INC as a Hindu body also. Everything was actually done by British. The Indian National Congress leaders were actually not at all communal, but British will create or paint a picture that INC was representing Hindus. So these are certain terms. Dufferin, the Viceroy, called the INC as a factory of sedition. So sedition, like going against the government, that is sedition. So Dufferin called INC as a factory of sedition. Government tried the policy of divide and rule, which I was speaking earlier, and carrot and stick policy. Carrot and stick policy again, they will show some small benefit or some small thing to appease them and tell like, see, we have done something for you. So that is all carrot policy. They will show something and attract the Indians, and if they were not listening to or not obeying what the British wanted, to impose on them, then they'll use the stick policy, and they'll put punitive charges, or they'll do something to yeah, suppress them. So that is the carrot and stick policy. We'll see them in future chapters. Encourage reactionary elements like Sir Syed Ahmad. If you remember in the last chapter, I have already told you this point. Sir Syed Ahmad, who started the Aligarh movement, he was actually promoting Western sciences and education among the Muslims, and he was actually a reformist. And the British actually took advantage of this. He started to give a fund and all those things to these leaders, Muslim leaders, and made them competitor to the INC. Even though every nationalist leader was coming together in INC without any communal feelings, British imposed this communal hatred and started to form other bodies through the Muslim leaders. So one body is UPA, which is not the present one, not the UPA which we see in news today. UPA was I think Unified Indian Patriots Association or something. So that body was formed by Sir Syed Ahmad, which was a body which will be like a rival body to INC. Now we'll see certain contributions of moderates. We have also seen in the last slide, like when we evaluated the nationalists. So these are again points, important points which can be a mains question. So please make a note of it. Constitutional reforms and propaganda in legislature. So they had started raising their voice in the legislature, in the INC meetings, and so they started influencing the reforms, what is happening in the British India government, and Indians' participation had also increased. Indian Council Act 1892, like I said, we'll discuss all the acts later, but because the timeline is around 1890s now, we'll see a few points. More members were allowed in the Imperial Legislative Council and Provincial Legislative Council. So Indians' participation were increasing by this act. All this was happening because of the voice raised by moderates. Some additional non-official members in Governors' Council. Even in the Governors' Council, Indians were getting admission. And a slight type of election had already started. Indirect election, not the direct ones, but indirect election had slowly started by this Council Act 1892. They had also been allowed to discuss the budget, but they were not allowed to vote. These are all terms under this particular act, okay, Indian Council Act 1892. After this, we'll have the Indian Council Act 1909, which is the Morley Minto reforms, where a lot of gain is happening for India. There again the voting will be allowed, like that many things will come, but these are only for 1892 Act. Budget could be discussed but not voted. Questions could be asked but no supplementary questions. So they were getting small permissions for small things, but with certain restrictions. So by each act, because of the efforts of moderates and Indians, things started getting good for India. So that is what is the first point: constitutional reforms and propaganda in legislature. Demand for self-government. Dadabhai, Gokhale, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, these were important leaders of that time, 1890s, who started demanding for self-government. And they gave the slogan, no taxation without representation, need majority of Indians in higher positions. So they told, you can tax us, but only when you give equal representation in the British government. And high salaries, pension, attack on other countries, rights of Indian abroad. So all those places where fund was misused and simply wasted by the British officers, this was being questioned, and even the rights of Indians living abroad were demanded. So you can see the leaders have been asking the right questions to the right officers, and this all were contribution of the moderates. They exposed corruption of bureaucracy, criticized government policies and foreign policies, the right to freedom of speech, associate, movement, press. These are all the fundamental rights in the present day India. So all these were being raised in the 1890s itself by all these leaders. Economic critique of British imperialism. This is where we'll see why chapter 12 is being merged in chapter 7, because chapter 12, the name is Economic Impact of British India. So that was just a chapter to give the points of economic problems in India. So I thought I'll merge it along with this, because this point is also a contribution of moderates. So the leaders or the critics were Dadabhai Naoroji, R.C. Dutt and D.E. Vacha. This was also asked in, I think, 2014 prelims. They gave a list of 4-5 names and asked whether who of the following were economic critics. So you should know the name. Dadabhai Naoroji, R.C. Dutt and D.E. Vacha are 3 important names. There are many others also, but these are 3 important names. Drain of wealth theory. Transformation of basically self-sufficient economy into colonial economy. So India was a self-sufficient economy and was the richest country of that time. But Britishers changed it into a colonial economy, and the Indian economy was collapsed. So we'll see the economic impact. This is actually from the chapter 12, and this is how. So chapter 7 had only that much information. It was about how the different kinds of bodies came, how the Indian National Congress was formed, what is the safety valve theory. We have seen everything, how the nationalist movements began, and what were the contributions of moderates. Now we'll see the economic impact in detail, which is the chapter 12. So in right side, the pictures you see is R.C. Dutt and Dadabhai Naoroji. Economic drain. This theory was the portion of national product of India, that is the GDP of India, which was not available for consumption of its people, but was getting drained away to Britain for political reasons, and India was not getting adequate economic or material returns to it. So a great portion of the Indian GDP was not at all being useful for Indian people, and British would take it out to their own land in England and give weird reasons for that, and Indians did not get any material returns. 2 important leaders and 2 important books by them: Dadabhai Naoroji, Poverty and Un-British Rule in India; R.C. Dutt, The Economic History of India. So you should know this. M.G. Ranade, Gopalakrishna Gokhale, C. Subramaniam Iyer, Prithvish Chandra Ray. These are also economic nationalists. Major components, that is, we already told, like, lot of things from the Indian national GDP were going out, but in what forms were it going? This also was asked once in prelims, like which of the following were part of economic drain. So we'll see the salaries and pensions of civil and military officials. Everything was being paid from Indian taxes, Indian money. Interest on foreign loans taken by the government. That means they will take loans from other countries, and the interest payment was done by Indian money, Indian tax. Profits of foreign investment in India. So people were coming to India and investing in India by crumbling the Indian industries, which we will see later. So whatever profits was getting gained, everything was going out from India. It was not being useful for any Indians. Store purchases, even the stationery and store purchases in British Britain for civil and military departments. So even their office store purchases were done by using Indian people's money. So whatever, when we see pictures or videos of present day England now, we can see very beautiful buildings, very beautiful bridges, offices, everything you can see. But if you should know, all these were built, the whole country's richness is built from the money from colonial countries, India being the most important one. India, Africa, or whichever country Britain ruled, they took all these monies, and all those huge buildings, palaces and everything you see in Britain are the you can call a money or a subsidy kind of thing given by India, the rich India of the 19th century. Payments for shipping and insurance services. So you see, there is not even a single thing which is not being paid by British themselves. Everything is paid by Indian money. So that was a few of the points. Deindustrialization. So we are going to see now what we saw was drain theory. Now we'll see each of the industry or entire economic impact on British India. We'll see different sectors and different classes of people. Deindustrialization, one-way free trade from net exporter to net importer. We knew like Indians were a great exporter, like whether it be jewels or gems or cotton, whatever it was, India was a great exporter, net exporter, but it was crumbled and it was changed into a net importer by very harsh British policies. Cheap and machine-made goods flooded Indian markets. So the Indian handicrafts or whatever was there was all totally ignored, and they were not allowed to go to England markets. Instead, raw materials from here will go to there, and then they will send the machine made goods, because industrial revolution was at its peak at that time in England. They'll send those goods to Indian market, so they'll force Indians to buy goods which they can actually produce themselves. Railway network was an added advantage. Charter Act 1813. If you know about this act, it was in this act that the England government told or took away the monopoly of the company. Earlier, the company had a free choice of trading all the goods, and they were the only ones who could trade in the eastern part of the world. That was the permission given by the British, actually a British government back in England. But in 1813 Act, the monopoly was taken away, and other traders from England also could come. Not only the companies, other English people also could come and trade. It was only restricted to, I mean, the company could now only have a monopoly in tea and trade with China. Other than that, everything was given equal rights to other traders as well. So obviously, when they see these kind of restrictions put on them, they will try to show all that anger onto Indian system or Indian people. By 1820, European markets almost closed for Indian goods. So like we already told, Indian goods could not enter the European markets. Loss of traditional livelihood, loss of patronage by Indian rulers and nobles. We have seen this already in decline of Mughals also. The Indian rulers used to give rewards or give recognition to skillful or talented artisans, and they would give some reward like gold coins or something they'll give. We have seen in movies and all. So these things, or the patronage itself, was crumbled because the British government never cared of what Indians are making or what Indians are investing in. So it was total loss for Indian artisans. Rapid deindustrialization, while England was becoming more rich industry, because industry, okay, we have already discussed this point. There it was growing and here it was crumbling. Ruralization. Ruralization means artisans and others faced losses, sold off products, and they had to shift to villages. So people who were like kind of an urban class, they became rural people because all their traditions and craft was not being recognized, and they could not make any money out of it. So that is about ruralization. Agriculture burden was one of the primary causes of poverty in India. We have already studied about the debt trap and all the harsh settlement policies in India on the farmers. Peasantry, again, permanent settlement, right-wise system, mile-wise system. This was what I was talking about. We have made a tabular column to compare, do a comparative study of all these three systems. We will show you in the agriculture related chapter. So government bothered only about revenues. Zamindars burdened the peasants. So British was waiting for revenue from zamindars, and zamindars were very harsh on the riots to gain maximum profit. Moneylenders involved and influenced judiciary, triple burden to peasants. So we know like taxes were very high, and it's a very simple point which you can understand. Stagnation of agriculture. So there were no incentives, like like in the present day in India, agriculture is not taxed. And also they are given subsidies, and they are given a lot of incentives, like or they are given a lot of advanced seeds or advanced technology, irrigation systems. A lot of things are provided by the government itself for the revival of agriculture. But British government in turn, they did not provide anything, and even when during the time of famines or during the time of drought, they even expected high taxes. There was no leverage, or there was no easiness, or what to say, the burden was not at all reduced for the farmers. And fragmentation of land, like Indian farmers, what they do is when a peasant dies, his land will be distributed among his son. So if there are 4 sons, the land will be distributed into 4 portions. So when generation after generation it will go, the land size will also become less and less. So when the land size becomes less, obviously the productivity also will become less, and out of that small land they have to still pay the high taxes which British government is demanding. Famine and poverty. It was actually a forced famine. Now usually famine happens when there is no rainfall, or there is continuous drought situation or something like that, and the food grains would be less. But in the time of British India, it was actually a forced famine by colonial rule. About 2.8 crore people died in the 1850s, that is during that time up to 1900s. So why is it a forced famine? The Britishers used to get all these food grains in taxes, and store in their storage for their personal use. Even when Indian people are dying, they did not care and they did not think of redistributing it to the people who are dying. So the famine was actually forced one by storing the excess production. Commercialization of Indian agriculture. The way of life was transformed to business enterprise. So like agriculture was actually a way of life for Indians right from the age of Harappan civilization or the prehistoric times. Indians were doing agriculture not as a business, they were doing it for their own survival, and the rest they may sell it or do it exchange with the other farmers or other artisans. But Britishers changed into a completely a business model kind of thing, and they forced cash crops and plantations. So instead of growing rice and wheat, they were forcing the Indians to grow cotton, indigo, rubber, jute, all these things which can be a big trade product. They never cared of whether people had enough to eat or not. They only thought about uh, making these kind of profit from cash crops. Obviously the price will shoot up, and all this price shooting up will not gain anything to the poor farmers. They will buy it cheap rates or as taxes from these poor farmers, and then the middlemen will distribute to the higher rich classes or the Britishers and others who came to trade in India. So peasants obviously resisted, and there were a lot of peasant movements. There is a chapter 17, which deals about all the peasant movements in India. There we'll see one important name I wanted to mention is Deccan riots in 1875, where large scale riots happened. So just remember the name as of now. Details we'll see later, who were the leaders and how it was suppressed or how it proceeded. We'll see that later. Late development of modern industry. So like the industrial revolution was in full flow in England, but in India nothing was promoted. The Britishers only cared of creating road and rail networks, and then taking off all the materials, raw materials from here, and then the cheap machine goods from England will come to India. So just to say a timeline, the first cotton textile industry in Bombay came in 1853, and the first jute mill came in Bengal in 1855. Just see the place names and times. And initially it was started by Indians, but most of the one will be owned by foreigners, and obviously no profit will go to Indians. So again the same point, raw materials were taken from India, and India was considered as a market. Huge investments were happening in India from across the world, but everything was profit motived, and every richness or every money was going out of India. Indians could not grow because of credit problems, poor technology, etc. So Indians did not have the funds to start their own company. Like now we have the Startup India, Stand-up India, everything, but that time there was nothing which government will do for Indians. They had no money to start a new industry. Even if they started, everything was handmade. They did not have the technology or machines to become or give equal competition to the British companies. Regional disparities, because the British India, they did not create rail networks for the good of or well-being of Indian people. They created rail networks in such a way that the things which are being produced at one particular place can be carried on to the ports, or from where they could ship it back to England. So all the railway networks, if you see, which was created at that time, was created with that motive alone. So obviously regional disparities will come only in those regions where, suppose, like if you have tea plantations in Assam, and if you want to export it from there to a particular port, that is how they will set up the railway network. They won't care if people from rural India has to come to urban India, or they have to go to a particular city, or they did not think of a metro concept. They only thought of taking their goods out of India to different places within India or outside India. So that is how railway networks were developed. Rise of Indian bourgeois class. Bourgeois, it is spelled as bourgeoisie. So it is a French term actually for middle class people. So they were the people who were junior officers under these British capitalists. So they tried helping distributing imports and exports, meaning they were trying to help the Indian people, the Indian goods. But what happened was they could not function independently. Obviously the Britishers would put restrictions and put terms and conditions like you can do business only in this part, you can do trading only in this part, and so it was entirely crumbling the Indian market or Indian economy. This one is the last point. Taxes, railway and free trade. Taxes I have already discussed multiple times. Railway, I have told you now already, railways were set up with Indian money, but it was benefiting the Britishers, and imports focused more. So imports of those cheap machine made goods were focused more. only raw materials were exported. So there is one statement actually, yeah, this is one. G.B. Joshi, he remarked that expenditure on railways is an Indian subsidy to British industries. So the whatever investment was made in railway, it was like the Indian people giving a subsidy to the British industries. Like the government is giving subsidies to Indians now for their growth. It was like something which Indians gave to the Britishers for the growth of their industries. So this is, I think, the last thing in this chapter. Taxation and one-way free trade we have already discussed. So these are the economic stagnation of India. We have given enough points to you, so you will be able to form a very good answer. These are again quotes mentioned in this chapter. There are a lot of important ones. I have taken only about leaders or people which you will know, like Curzon, Bipin Chandra, Lala Lajpat Rai, Yasidat. So you'll just read it out. The Congress is tottering to its fall, and one of my great ambitions while in India is to assist it to a peaceful demise. Lord Curzon, if you know, he was the one viceroy at the time of the Swadeshi movement and the partition of Bengal. So he told like the Congress was already crumbling, and what he wanted during his time of being viceroy is he wanted to end it peacefully. So he was a very imperialistic person, or maybe a pro-British kind of person with no concession or no feelings for the Indian nationalists or Indian movements. So this was a very harsh statement by him. The next one, the period from 1858 to 1905 was the seed time of Indian nationalism, and the early nationalists sowed the seeds well and deep. So this is actually Bipin Chandra, who is always telling good things about Indian nationalists and Indian National Congress. We have already seen what he told during the safety wall theory also. He is telling that Indian nationalists were doing the right thing and they sowed the seeds well and deep for proper rise of nationalism. Next one, it was best an opportunist movement. It opened opportunity for treacheries and hypocrisies. It enabled some people to trade in the name of patriotism. So again, Lala Lajpat Rai is like somewhere in the middle path. He's telling like Indians used it as an opportunity. Many middlemen and many bourgeois class which we saw, they used it enabled some people to trade in the name of patriotism. It's not only telling about the middlemen, it's also telling about the Congress leaders who were representing the INC. So because Lala Lajpat Rai, he'll be an extremist, he's not a moderate. He felt like the people who were getting representation, the early nationalists, they were getting appeased by the representation they got. They are representing India, they are in the parliament, or they are in the INC meetings. So in the name of patriotism, they are doing things for their own self-gain. That is what Lala Lajpat Rai had to tell about the moderates. Next is, taxation raised by the king is like the moisture sucked by the sun, to be returned to the earth as fertilizing rain. But the moisture raised from Indian soil now descends as fertilizing rain largely on other land and not on India. So Asi Dutt, we showed you the picture also, he's an economic critic and he's telling exactly the right thing. Usually when king will tax, like Akbar and all used to tax the Indians, they'll tax it, and whatever is taxed will come and return to Indian people as in some form, some gain, some benefits will be there. But when the Britishers came, whatever was being taxed was coming back as rainfall, coming back as good benefits, not to Indian land but to other land meaning England. So this was a very powerful statement by R.C. Dutt, which gives you the total idea of what was his mindset. Now we'll see prelims questions and then end this chapter. Who among the following became the president of Indian National Congress more than once? So I have not taken the lecture for Indian National Congress. I'll tell you one thing, just put in Google like Indian National Congress President's Wikipedia page. They have given in detail year by year in picture, with the picture and with the year, and it's very easy to understand the total way. You will see like when did Mahatma Gandhi become the national president, when did Sarojini Naidu become the national president. Up till the present date, all Indian national leaders are mentioned there. So there are a lot of questions which can be found out of it, like who was the first Indian, who was the first Muslim, who was the first woman, whether any foreigners have become the president of president of Indian National Congress, I mean. So these things are mentioned there. Also this question you can answer from there, whether these people have become the president more than once. Okay, you have to tell me whom in the following become. You have to see in Wikipedia and answer this question. Of course, we will be taking a lecture later, but only if you do it yourself, you will have a sense of what to say, a feeling to go and explore things. So please answer this question by looking into Wikipedia page. Next question, which of the following were published by Dadabhai Naoroji? Again, you have to tell the works by him. I have not mentioned these names in this chapter, but I think in the first or second chapter we have mentioned this, so try answering this. Out of these four books, which are written by Dadabhai Naoroji? Voice of India, Sudarak, Bombay Herald and Poverty India. Or if everything is not written by him, you have to tell me which one is written by whom, which is not written by Dadabhai Naoroji and who actually wrote it. So try exploring and please try to answer, because time is running out and we have to start practicing questions or it will cost you prelims 2018 very badly. So please try answering the questions. And if you want to purchase the entire PDF, which has over 320 questions of modern Indian history based on Spectrum and the NCRTs, please contact our Facebook page, Vysh IAS. This is the link. We'll come up with the chapter 8 soon. Till then, enjoy learning. Thank you. Have a nice day.